right now. The global war on oil escalates as America reportedly weighs whether to expand the operation in Iran.
Iran is a serious threat to the world, to the Middle East and to the world. So I wanted to put out that fire.
Plus, day 2 of testimony on threats to the homeland as tensions boil over abroad.
The objectives that have been laid out by the president are different from the objectives that have been laid out by the Israeli government.
And a spring break nightmare. A University of Alabama student vanishes in Spain. The investigation into his disappearance and why officials now suspect foul play.
We just want to bring him home safe. We don't care if he got into trouble and got himself in a jam, or, you know, somebody knows something, they're afraid to speak up. At this point, we just want him home.
It's the top of the hour. Thank you so much for staying with us here on NewsNation Live. I'm Nick Smith at our Chicago headquarters. And right now, the war in the Middle East is taking its toll on energy markets across the world as Iran trades fire with its neighbors, targeting crucial oil and natural gas sites. Iran striking a Saudi refinery along the Red Sea, along with 2 refineries in Kuwait and natural gas facilities in Qatar. Those strikes in retaliation for an Israeli attack on a crucial gas field in the Persian Gulf known as South Pars. Iran heavily relies on natural gas for its own power supply and gets the vast majority of it from the South Pars field. Here at home, President Trump saying Israel will not attack South Pars again, but the U.S. will, quote, massively blow up the entirety of the field if Iran continues its attacks on facilities in Qatar. All these attacks sending shockwaves through oil and gas markets, spiking crude oil prices to $118 per barrel, up nearly 50% since the first day of strikes nearly 3 weeks ago. NewsNation's Joe Khalil is live in Dubai following all of these developments for us. Joe, good afternoon. $118 per barrel. That's a lot.
You know, that price was going up since the beginning of the conflict, but what we saw overnight, Nick, was really a game changer and an escalation in this war, the likes of which we really haven't seen. And that is because both Israel and Iran made direct attacks in a more meaningful way on their energy, on each other's energy sources. It started with Israel striking that Iranian oil field, oil and natural gas, the largest one in Iran, one of the largest in the world. And in response to that, Iran promised they were going to hit several targets throughout the Middle East in the Gulf states overnight. As you can see by this video here, that is exactly what they did. Iran hitting major oil hubs in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait. In some cases, Nick, 20% of the world's supply of liquid natural gas comes from Qatar. In some cases, much of it coming from the specific refinery that Iran hit. So this is obviously going to have a major impact on the global supply. We're already seeing that. In part, that's why President Trump almost immediately responded by condemning Iran and telling Iran that if that continues, they will face consequences. But at the same time, the president also distanced himself from Israel, saying that the U.S. did not essentially give its blessing to Israel for that strike on the Iranian oil field. President Trump saying he didn't know about it. Now, there's a lot of reporting to the contrary that the administration did know that was going to happen. But still today, his posture is very clear, does not condone it, says Israel will not do that again. The Iranians are not heeding that warning, by the way. We just got a statement not so long ago from the Iranian foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, and it is a defiant one. He says here, quote, our response to Israel's attack on our infrastructure employed fraction of our power. The only reason for restraint was respect for requested de-escalation. Zero restraint if our infrastructures are struck again. Any end to this war must address damage to our civilian sites. So there is obviously a lot of pain, a lot of economic ripple effects that, again, already are running through the global markets, and you're feeling it. It's not just in Asia or Europe or in the Middle East, but it's in North America, in the United States as well. People are starting to feel the difference now as the price of oil is squeezed and continues to go up, Nick.
Joe, earlier we heard the Secretary of War talk about how Iran's military had been depleted, their air, their ground, and their sea troops. Yet Iran does not seem to be backing down. Do people feel still nervous about the situation?
Well, I can tell you where we are in Dubai. Every single night, we still get these alerts on our phones about drone attacks and missile attacks coming from Iran. That has not stopped. Just last night, there was a smaller amount, but still about a dozen or a little bit more than that drones that were intercepted in the skies here over the UAE, over Dubai. And several missiles as well. So while Iran may be degraded, I don't think there's any protests there from anybody. I think that is factually, you can see that. They're not entirely diminished in their capacity to launch missiles, to launch drones. They continue to do it. You're seeing evidence of it on your screen right now. And so, you know, if the U.S. wants to continue to do that, that's at least what Secretary Hegseth said today, that this is going to be an even more enhanced day when it comes to strikes on Iran. We'll see how that develops.
Joe Khalil live for us this afternoon in Dubai. Joe, stay safe.
But we're doing this excursion, and when it's completed, we're going to have a much safer world. And the Prime Minister agrees with me on this. She considers it to be terrible what Iran did. I think every country does, just about every country does. Iran is a serious threat to the world, to the Middle East and to the world.
That, of course, was President Trump within the last hour, standing firm on his mission against Iran. To date, the U.S. has hit more than 7,000 targets across Iran, and now the Pentagon is asking for an additional $200 billion for the war. Mr. Trump meeting with Japan's Prime Minister today, saying the two will be discussing the war in Iran. Kelly Meyer joins us live from the White House with the very latest. Kelly, good afternoon.
Hey there, Nick. So we know the president is meeting behind closed doors with Japan's Prime Minister. This is the second time the two are meeting face-to-face, but the first visit here at the White House, and it's the first visit from a U.S. ally after President Trump asked for allies to help secure the Strait of Hormuz. So we are expecting the two are talking about that. Japan had yet to say whether or not they would or would not join in to make sure that oil tankers could continue to get through the Strait of Hormuz. This was something that the Prime Minister said they would be discussing. And even ahead of this, Japan, United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, and the Netherlands put out a joint statement saying that they condemn Iran's actions so far, called on this war to stop. And they also said that they would be considering helping to secure and expressing their readiness to contribute to appropriate efforts to ensure the safe passage of commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. So that's something that they could be discussing. The president saying that he hears that Japan has 90% of their oil that goes through that strait. So he said that's a big reason for them to step up. Here's more from the president.
We've had tremendous support and relationship with Japan on everything. And I believe that based on statements that were given to us yesterday, the day before yesterday, having to do with Japan, they are really stepping up to the plate. Yes.
And President Trump also confirmed that he may seek $200 billion in new Pentagon funding, calling it a, quote, small price to pay to make sure that we stay tippy-top, he said. And the Trump administration is considering deploying thousands of additional U.S. troops to the Middle East as President Trump weighs Iran's next steps. Here's what he had to say about that.
No, I'm not putting troops anywhere. If I were, I certainly wouldn't tell you. But I'm not putting troops, and we will do whatever is necessary to keep the price.
And President Trump responding to one of the Japanese reporters that asked the president why he didn't tell Japan before he attacked Iran. And he said, why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? In that moment, getting some attention today. Nick.
Kelly, the Pentagon also gave an update on the war. What did they say?
Yeah, and Secretary Hegseth saying, as Joe mentioned, that today would be an intense day of strikes. But he has been saying that each time he briefs the press there at the Pentagon. He did say that the U.S. is winning this war, though it was interesting. General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, did say that Iran came into this fight with a lot of weapons and they still retain some capability. When asked when this might end, this is what the secretary had to say.
It will be at the president's choosing ultimately, where we say, hey, we've achieved what we need to on behalf of the American people to ensure our security. So no time set on that, but we're very much on track.
And U.S. Central Command telling us in a new development, Nick, that they are aware of reports of a U.S. F-35 that had to make an emergency landing at a U.S. air base in the region. They say that was after flying a combat mission over Iran. They say the aircraft landed safely and the pilot is in stable condition, and the incident is under investigation, but they didn't exactly say why that aircraft had to make that emergency landing. There are some reports that it was due to Iranian fire, and that's something that we are looking into. Nick.
Kelly Meyer live for us this afternoon at the White House. Kelly, thank you so much. For more, I'd like to welcome in senior national security contributor and former U.S. Air Force Assistant Vice Chief of Staff, retired Lieutenant General Richard Newton. General Newton, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Nick. Always good to be with you.
Good to have you here, sir. It's day 20 of the war with Iran. President Trump said the war will be over soon. Let's listen to what some he had to say.
Be over with pretty soon. We've obliterated their Navy. We've obliterated their just about everything there is to obliterate, including leadership. Their Navy's gone, their Air Force is gone, their anti-aircraft equipment is gone. We're flying wherever we want, Pete. We have nobody even shooting at us. They have, I mean, and as you know, their leadership is gone. Their leaders are gone. They picked new leaders, they're gone. They picked new leaders, they're gone. And now they're looking for new leaders again. We can take out the island if anytime we want. I call it the little oil island that sits there, so totally unprotected. We've taken out everything but the pipes.
General Newton, the verb that stood out to me was obliterate. What stands out to you?
Well, first and foremost, Nick, the highly successful with regard to our military objectives on the U.S. side, certainly going after Iran's offensive and defensive capabilities in a spectacular fashion. What an indication for me in terms of how goes the employment of, in this case, U.S. air power is General Kane reported this morning at the presser at the Pentagon that we're now using what we call stand-in weapon systems capabilities, specifically the A-10 attack aircraft, as well as Apache helicopters down on the southern flank, which is now directed towards those fast attack gunboats from the Iranian Navy that is putting in harm's way the Strait of Hormuz. That's an indication. The other aspect of this is what was reported a couple days or so ago, and we're still deep into the target set, is going after Iranian defense industrial base now to produce the ballistic missiles and the drones and so forth. The other aspect of this also is on the Israeli side of the ledger with regard to going after the infrastructure that supports the regime, the leadership, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the besieged militia, the National State Police, now to create the conditions for the regime to collapse. So as Secretary Haig says we're on track. Iran, however, still has some punch, specifically up in the Strait of Hormuz area, and that's what we're going after right now.
But General Newton, it seems as though Iran has a strategy of their own by simply instilling fear, because no one wants to send their ships through that Strait of Hormuz.
They are, and they're using what I would call economic warfare, Nick, along your line of questioning there. And so they're again going after specifically the super oil tanker carriers, the liquid natural gas carriers and so forth that go through the Strait of Hormuz in their form of economic warfare. I think they're down to that last card because, as President Trump says, we've gone after their leadership, we're going after their infrastructure. We certainly are really taking out their offensive and defensive capabilities. And so the work to be done now is specifically focused on the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, as well as the rest of Iran, and especially that infrastructure now we're going after, especially with Israel in the lead, that supports the regime itself.
But General Newton, we also heard this morning Secretary of War Pete Hegseth acknowledge there is still a significant amount of work left to be done. What are the likely next steps now for the U.S. as this war escalates, and what do you believe they mean?
Well, I'm looking with the arrival that Marine Amphibious Readiness Group that's coming out of Japan, should be there in a few days or so, as well as the Marine Expeditionary Unit of about 2,300 Marines. what those capabilities provide Admiral Cooper, the commander of U.S. Central Command, are options. Should he be tasked to perhaps go occupy Karg Island or perhaps have Marines go ashore in the shore battery areas where Iran still threatens the strait with regard to ballistic missiles and drones? We'll see how that plays out. But so far, we're now employing really what I called previously those stand-in aircraft capabilities through the A-10 attack aircraft and Apache helicopters. But we'll see. That gives Admiral Cooper, again, options to really clear the strait. And then after that, if we control the strait with maritime supremacy as well as air supremacy, we start getting those ships being able to flow back and forth through the strait. That's going to be critical.
And Iran making this, of course, a regional war, particularly when they hit Qatar. Many didn't see that coming. General Newton, Iran also launched missiles across the Gulf and hit the Saudi oil refinery on the Red Sea. General Kane was asked what it means that Iran still has that capability 3 weeks into this war. Let's listen to what he had to say.
They came into this fight with a lot of weapons. This is why we continue to be as aggressive and assertive as we can against their ballistic missile capability, both their medium-range ballistic missile capability and their short-range missile capability. So we are continuing to hunt and find them and kill them, and we will continue to do so. So they still retain some capability. And we have layered defenses throughout the region that will allow us to protect those, and we're working with our partners across the Gulf region to help them improve any defensive capabilities that they may need.
And General Newton, you just referenced those layered defenses that we heard Kane talk about there. What do you make of the current state of where things are here at day 20? From your expertise, do you believe pivoting from targeting military sites to oil facilities could become a dangerous escalation?
It can, but it remains, as General Kane says, a very target-rich environment for U.S. and Israeli forces to counteract those Iranian moves. I would remind our viewers that this is not based on a specific timeline, but it's more based on conditions. And that's what General Kane refers to as we're going after other capabilities and other employment that Iran now uses out of their playbook, which we had anticipated. That includes going after targets that where Iran threatens our Gulf Arab nations and allies, such as in the Red Sea and so forth. We will do that. We will hunt, find, fix, target, and kill the Iranian capabilities to do so. The end game here is, again, to prevent Iran from being able to retaliate against not only U.S. interests, Israel, but also the Gulf Arab nations as well. That's the end game that we're trying to achieve here, and we're going to be doing that here within the next several days, if not next couple of weeks.
General Newton, day 20 of this war, did you see it lasting this long?
I did. I anticipated that it wouldn't be just a matter of days. We talked earlier about this, Nick, perhaps a couple weeks or so ago, that will go into several weeks. I believe we're still a couple weeks away from an end game here. We're early on two clocks real quick. One, obviously, are some of the conditions at the gas pump for Americans with regard to the price of gas, with what's happening with the price of barrel per oil that you were talking with Joe Khalil about earlier. But there's another clock here, and that clock is Iran. How much can Iran sustain with regard to not only going deeply into our target folders with regard to the regime itself and its retaliatory capabilities, but really what impact it's having on their economy and their leadership. So we'll see. But I believe the end game will be coming soon. It's going to be conditions-based versus timeline, but we're still within a couple weeks of that happening.
Lieutenant General Richard Newton, sir, thanks again for joining us.
Always good to be with you, Nick.
The president's commander-in-chief gets to make a decision about what's an imminent threat. The intelligence community, well, the intelligence...
Reclaim my time. Reclaim my time.
Intelligence community has provided a body of intelligence.
My time.
U.S. intelligence officials back in the hot seat on Capitol Hill today. We'll take you inside the hearing room coming up. And later, an American college student missing overseas. The latest from Spain on the search for James Gracie.